Okay, welcome back to part two of day 81. So picking up from our stretch break here. We're going to move on to reproductive system, specifically focusing on pregnancy and development. So we'll cover the first half of pregnancy in this video part, and then we'll get to kind of more information on pregnancy in a second. I do recommend watching the crash course videos. This one's about 11 minutes long. It does, as always, they give a pretty good overview of kind of what's going on in the events happening, what's happening there. So what is pregnancy? It's a time from fertilization of an egg until an infant is born. We talk about the baby in the womb. The medical term for it is conceptus. That's the developing offspring. And it's typically divided into kind of two descriptors. One being the embryo, which is a period of time from fertilization until about week 8. And then the fetus, which is from about week 9 until birth. So embryo and fetus are the two terms that we look at. This whole period of being pregnant is known as a gestation period. So gestation period for humans is approximately 280 days, give or take a little bit. And that's the date from the last period until birth there. If we look at kind of what's happening, so you can see fertilization, 1 week old conceptus, 3 week old embryo, 5 week old embryo, 8 week old embryo. So there's this massive period of growth between kind of weeks 8 and weeks 12. So over that month long period, it grows quite a bit. And then oocyte is viable. So the oocyte is the egg. So in order for fertilization to actually occur, you have to have an egg and you have to have sperm. So this oocyte, the egg, is viable for up to about 24 hours after ovulation. Sperm are viable for up to about 48 hours after ejaculation. At least according to your textbook, 2 years ago when we taught the class, we had some students who were asking about that, so we looked it up. And there was some on Google searches, depending on how much you trust Google searches, saying that some sperm may survive as long as 5 to 7 days after ejaculation inside the female body. So potentially, a week or so after ovulation, there's potential to get pregnancy. So for fertilization to occur, sexual intercourse must occur no more than 2 days before ovulation, and then no later than 24 hours after, again, kind of varying that depending on the 5 to 7 days there. Cells must make their way to the uterine tube for fertilization to be possible, and then sperm are attracted to the oocyte by chemicals. All right, so if we look at the chemotaxis, is the idea of cells moving towards or away from the stimulus. So in this case, the sperm are positively chemotaxis, drawn towards the fallopian tubes where the oocyte is. So when they do reach the oocyte, what's going to happen is enzymes are going to, on the head of the sperm, that acrosome, are going to break down the follicle cells. There's something called the corona radiata. And if you look on the picture here, the corona radiata is this layer of cells that go around the egg. So here's the corona radiata, right? And then just inside of that, there's a region here called the zona pellucida. And then that's the actual oocyte, the egg inside of there. So sperm will undergo this acrosomal reaction. They'll break down that corona radiata. And then membrane receptors on the oocyte will pull in the head of the first sperm to make contact. And in doing so, it triggers a chemical change on the surface of the membrane of the cell, so it will no longer accept any sperm. Occasionally that does happen, and occasionally you can get twins or other sorts of things happening as a result of it. So the oocyte at that point will then undergo a second meiotic division and produce an ovum and a polar body, and then we begin kind of the process of producing living things on there. So if we're looking at here, this is, you can see the sperm around the corona radiata around the oocyte, which is the inside of there. So fertilization occurs again when this genetic material combines with that of the oocyte on the inside. So just going to kind of work our way through kind of what's actually happening. So again, this is the uterus inside the female body there is what we're looking at. And then kind of things we want to pay attention to. We'll talk about ovulation and kind of work our way all the way through implantation there. So in ovulation, you've got the oocyte that comes off of the ovary and is drawn by the fimbriae of the uterine tube into or drawn into the uterine tube there. And so when that first cell forms, we call that the zygote. And you can see that if we go back here, right, so here, that's where we have our zygote fertilization occurring. All right, so the zygote is a result of the fusion of the DNA from the sperm and the egg. This will begin a period of rapid mitotic division known as cleavage. This starts about 24 hours after fertilization, and then the zygote will continue down the uterine tube, moving towards the uterus. So if we go on here. Now, it is worth mentioning that sometimes the zygote doesn't make it all the way down to the uterus for implantation. Sometimes it remains inside the uterine tube in what's known as an ectopic pregnancy. And this is really bad because as the fetus, embryo and then fetus grow in the fallopian tube, it actually rupture the fallopian tube into the abdominal cavity. So that's really bad. All right, so moving on. So cleavage, again, is this rapid mitotic division. About 3 days after ovulation, the embryo reaches the uterus and floats around in the uterus is something known as a morula, which is a solid ball of 16 to 32 cells. So this is kind of an image of what a morula would look like. So you can see unfertilized egg, zygote, 2, 4, 8, and then we're going 16, and if we divide one more time, it would be a 32. So something sort of like that is the morula stage. And so here we've got our zygote at this point, continuing along there, 2, 4, right, 6, 8, 16 to 32. All right, that's the morula there. And then from there, it can move into the uterus where it's going to float around. While it's there, it will continue to divide and form something called a blastocyst. There's a term, chorionic vesicles, that kind of goes along with that. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it is part of it. So anyways, the blastocyst is this hollow ball-like structure, 100 or more cells. And it secretes a hormone called human chorionic gonadotropin, which induces the corpus luteum, which is way back in the ovaries, to continue producing hormones, preventing menses. So we don't want a period to happen. We don't want to flush out the uterus until that placenta takes over the role and starts producing things that keep the pregnancy going. So now we're looking at kind of this early blastula, late blastula stage, this hollow ball of cells there. Okay. So you can see that blastocyst kind of moving down and in there. All right. The implanting blastocyst will consist of several different layers of cells. We'll talk about those in just a bit there. So we'll pause and take another stretch break and pick back up from the last little bit of pregnancy.